122-year-old, a $10 domain name, and the biggest cyber attack the world had ever seen. On the morning of May 12, 2017, computers across the world began locking up. Hospital screens in England went red. Train station displays in Germany showed ransom demands. Gas stations in China stopped processing payments. Factory assembly lines in France ground to a halt. In the span of just a few hours, a single piece of malware had spread to more than 230,000 computers across 150 countries. It encrypted every file it could find and displayed a chilling message. Your files have been encrypted. Pay $300 in Bitcoin within 3 days, or the price doubles. Wait 7 days, and your files are gone forever. The weapon behind this attack was not invented by criminals. It was built by the National Security Agency of the United States, stolen by hackers, leaked on the internet, and weaponized by North Korea. This is the story of WannaCry, the hack that broke the world in 24 hours, and the 22-year-old who accidentally stopped it. To understand WannaCry, you have to start with a secret weapon. Inside the NSA, there is an elite unit called Tailored Access Operations. Their job is to find vulnerabilities in software and turn them into cyber weapons. At some point, they discovered a critical flaw in Microsoft Windows. It was in SMB version 1, the protocol that allows computers to share files across a network. The vulnerability, later cataloged as CV 2017-0144, allowed an attacker to execute code remotely on any unpatched Windows machine, with zero user interaction. No clicking a link, no opening an email attachment, just an open port and an unpatched system. The NSA codenamed this exploit EternalBlue, and for years, they used it quietly for intelligence operations, never telling Microsoft about the vulnerability. Then on April 14, 2017, a mysterious group called the Shadow Brokers dumped a collection of stolen NSA hacking tools onto the internet. EternalBlue was among them. Microsoft had quietly released a patch called MS-17-010 1 month earlier, in March 2017, likely after being tipped off by the NSA. But millions of machines worldwide had not been updated. The digital equivalent of a loaded weapon was now lying in the open, and someone was about to pick it up. At approximately 7:44 a.m. UTC on May 12, 2017, the first WannaCry infections appeared. Unlike most ransomware, WannaCry did not need anyone to click anything. It was a worm. It scanned the internet for computers with open port 445, the SMB file sharing port. When it found an unpatched machine, it used EternalBlue to break in and double Pulsar, another stolen NSA tool, to install itself. Then it did two things simultaneously. First, it encrypted every file on the machine using AES-128 and RSA-2048 encryption, locking users out of their own data. Second, it began scanning for more victims, both on the local network and across the entire internet, probing random IP addresses. This self-replicating behavior is what made WannaCry so devastating. Every infected machine became a launchpad for hundreds more infections. Within 1 hour, thousands of machines were compromised. Within 4 hours, entire hospital networks were down. Within 12 hours, it had reached 150 countries. No phishing email, no social engineering, just a worm eating its way through every unpatched Windows machine on Earth. Nowhere was the damage more visible or more dangerous than in the United Kingdom's National Health Service. 80 out of 236 NHS trusts were hit. 603 NHS organizations in total, including 595 GP practices. 19,000 medical appointments were canceled, including urgent surgeries and cancer treatments. 5 hospitals were forced to divert ambulances entirely, sending emergency patients to facilities further away. Doctors could not access patient records. Lab results disappeared. MRI machines went offline. Hospitals reverted to pen and paper. The reason the NHS was so vulnerable was painfully simple. Roughly 70% of NHS computers were still running Windows XP, an operating system that Microsoft had stopped supporting in 2014. No security updates, no patches, no protection against EternalBlue. NHS Digital had warned trusts to upgrade. But the NHS is not one organization. It is hundreds of independent trusts, each managing their own IT budget. Many simply did not have the money or the urgency to upgrade. The total cost to the NHS was estimated at £92 million. But the true cost, in delayed diagnoses, postponed treatments, and patients turned away from emergency rooms, is impossible to calculate. While the NHS grabbed headlines, WannaCry was tearing through organizations worldwide. In Spain, telecommunications giant Telefonica was one of the first major corporations hit, with employee computers across the country displaying the ransom screen. In France, Renault was forced to shut down several automobile factories. In Germany, Deutsche Bahn's electronic departure boards at train stations began showing the WannaCry ransom note instead of schedules. In China, over 20,000 PetroChina gas stations lost the ability to process electronic payments. Thousands of university students found their thesis papers and research encrypted. In Japan, Hitachi reported disruptions to email and internet systems that lasted days. In the United States, FedEx suffered shipping delays that would ultimately cost the company more than $300 million. Russia, ironically, was the hardest-hit country by total infections. The Interior Ministry confirmed over 1,000 government computers were compromised. Telecom provider Megaphone and banking giant Sberbank both reported attacks. In total, WannaCry hit hospitals, banks, telecoms, railways, universities, factories, and government agencies across more than 150 countries in under 24 hours. It was the fastest-spreading cyber attack in history. While the world was panicking, a 22-year-old security researcher in a small seaside town in Devon, England, was staring at his computer screen. His name was Marcus Hutchins. Online, he was known as Malware Tech. He worked for Cryptus Logic, a cybersecurity firm based in Los Angeles, and he happened to be on a week off when WannaCry hit. Marcus got his hands on a sample of the malware and started pulling it apart. Deep in the code, he found something strange. Before encrypting anything, the malware tried to connect to a very long, seemingly random domain name. The domain was not registered. Nobody owned it. Marcus had a hypothesis. Maybe it was a command and control server. If he registered the domain, he could track the infections. So at roughly 3 p.m. UTC on May 12th, he registered the domain for $10.69 through Namecheap and pointed it to his sinkhole server. Within minutes, something extraordinary happened. New WannaCry infections stopped. The domain was a kill switch. The malware was programmed to check if this domain existed. If the domain resolved, meaning someone owned it, the malware would not execute. The original authors likely built this as a sandbox detection technique. If the malware was being analyzed in a virtual machine, all domains typically resolve. By checking for this obscure domain, the malware could detect sandboxes and shut down. But Marcus had registered it on the real internet, and the kill switch activated globally. He did not set out to be a hero. He just wanted to understand how the malware worked. And in doing so, he accidentally saved millions of machines from infection. The question that haunted investigators was simple. Who built WannaCry? In June 2017, the NSA assessed with moderate confidence that the attack was linked to North Korean intelligence. In October 2017, the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre upgraded that to high confidence, pointing to North Korea's Lazarus Group. On December 18, 2017, The White House formally and publicly attributed WannaCry to North Korea. The Lazarus Group is not a ragtag operation. It is a division of North Korea's Reconnaissance General Bureau, their military intelligence agency. The same group was responsible for the 2014 Sony Pictures hack and the 2016 Bangladesh bank heist, where they stole $81 million through the SWIFT banking network. WannaCry was likely a revenue generation operation for a regime under crushing international sanctions. But as a money-making scheme, it was surprisingly ineffective. Despite infecting over 230,000 computers, the total ransom collected was only about $140,000 in Bitcoin across 3 wallet addresses. Most victims either had backups, could not figure out how to buy Bitcoin, or simply refused to pay. In February 2021, the U.S. Department of Justice indicted 3 North Korean military hackers believed to be members of the Lazarus Group for their role in WannaCry and other attacks. The financial impact of WannaCry was staggering. Risk modeling firm Science estimated total global losses at $4 billion. Other assessments put the figure as high as $8 billion. FedEx alone reported $300 million in damages. The NHS spent £92 million on recovery. Renault lost production days across multiple factories. PetroChina lost revenue from 20,000 gas stations going offline. But the ransom payments themselves were tiny, only about $140,000 total. The attackers made almost nothing from the attack itself. This disconnect reveals something important about ransomware. The direct payment is rarely the real cost. It is the downtime, the recovery, the lost business, the reputational damage, and in the case of healthcare, the risk to human life. Microsoft President Brad Smith called WannaCry a wake-up call, comparing the NSA losing EternalBlue to the military having its Tomahawk missiles stolen. He argued that governments stockpiling cyber vulnerabilities rather than disclosing them endangers the very citizens they are supposed to protect. WannaCry exposed failures at every level. Organizations failed to patch. Microsoft had released the fix 2 full months before the attack. Every machine that was updated was completely immune. Governments failed by hoarding vulnerabilities. The NSA discovered EternalBlue and kept it secret, turning a defensive weakness into an offensive weapon. When that weapon was stolen and leaked, it became everyone's problem. Critical infrastructure failed by running outdated software. 70% of NHS computers on Windows XP is not just an IT failure. It is a policy failure. And the global response failed by being too slow. It took 7 months to formally attribute WannaCry to North Korea. WannaCry changed the conversation around cybersecurity permanently. It elevated ransomware from a nuisance crime to a national security threat. It accelerated the retirement of Windows XP worldwide. It led to increased cybersecurity funding for the NHS and other healthcare systems. And it proved that in a connected world, a single vulnerability can cascade across every continent in hours. The kill switch domain that Marcus Hutchins registered for $10.69 is still active today. It has to be, because WannaCry is still out there, still trying to spread, and if that domain ever goes offline, the infections could resume.